So, whatever happened to that super strange yet super memorable 1990 horror superhero film, Darkman? Let's find out. Movies,
Music and monsters.
Hey guys, Dan Monroe here, talking about movies, music, and monsters. Now, real quick, before we get started, I want to say thank you to whoever sent me this. Hey, it's the Antimatter Me. It showed up in the mail the other day, addressed to me, with no name, no return address, with a simple note that just said, "Love your channel." Man, this is super cool, and I didn't have it in my collection. I do now, so whoever sent this, thank you. How cool is that? Oh boy, Darkman. Now I know that this film clearly falls under the category of superhero horror, and it was either the first or one of the first in that genre. But I remember watching this film back when I was like, 20, 21 years old, but not really seeing the superhero connection. I just thought it was a really unusual film with great actors, a bizarre storyline, and tons of really cool practical makeups and special effects. I don't know, just something about this film really stuck with me all these years, and there is a ton of information on this film to get to, so grab your black trench coat and your severed finger collection with a bucket of stale popcorn, and let's dive in. Now, for those of you who have never seen Darkman, it's essentially, in short, the story of Peyton Westlake, a brilliant scientist who specializes in artificial skin reproduction for burn victims who, after being attacked by a group of ruthless mobsters and unrecognizably disfigured, now takes it upon himself to bring justice to those responsible while, unfortunately, slowly losing not only the love of his life, but his mind. Take it. Take the f***ing elephant. The brilliant Hollywood director Sam Raimi really loved not only the classic Universal horror films from the 30s and 40s, but also the dark characters of Batman and the Shadow, and absolutely had his mind set on doing a film himself on the Shadow character, but Universal Pictures would not grant him the rights to the character because they apparently had already been developing their own adaptation since the early 1980s, but never let it be said that any discouragement can't be overcome with just a little bit of creativity. Sam Raimi said, "Okay, the heck with it. I'll just create my own character, Darkman," and he certainly did. I always thought it was a really interesting connection between the catchphrases of both The Shadow and Darkman, both formed with questions with "Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men?" and Darkman's being "Who is Darkman?" The initial idea for Darkman came from a short story that Raimi had previously written about a man who could change his face to become other people, but as the story quickly enveloped into a 40-page treatment, the idea expanded to focus on one guy who had lost his own face, exploring the idea that he could use his newly found face-changing ability to battle criminals and bring justice to the underworld. Now, Raimi admittedly borrowed elements and concepts from a lot of other great films like Phantom of the Opera, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, The Elephant Man, Jekyll and Hyde, obviously The Shadow, with maybe a little bit of Batman thrown in there for good measure, and this is actually really kind of interesting. Raimi himself never considered this story, Darkman, to be a horror story. He was quoted as saying that, yeah, it's a tragic story with a hideous character, but in the end, it's really the story of a man trying to recapture his lost love, well, with a whole bunch of gritty action and gore thrown in on top, of course. You know, if this story had taken place today in 2024, it would have been less about a physical piece of paper containing important information, but rather the enemies of Darkman hacking into his own personal server, or even worse, Darkman bank accounts. So I'd literally like to take just 1 minute to talk about today's sponsor, Aura, which is really quite an amazing company for making sure that you're protected online. I mean, think about it. The odds of you getting dumped in a bucket of acid, reconstructing your own skin, and then becoming a legendary nocturnal crime fighter are about 300 billion to 1. But the odds of your information getting hacked is about 1 in 4. Just recently, the personal information of 73 million customers was leaked onto the dark web. But come on, how is this possible? Well, there are data brokers online who literally sell your personal information, addresses, bank accounts, whatever. It's all out there. So, after Aura reached out to me, I did a little investigating online about my personal information. They showed me who was selling my information and automatically submitted opt-out requests, which is pretty cool. I also get top-notch antivirus, a VPN, identity theft protection, all in one place for a very reasonable price. So, if you want to find out what's going on with your personal information and you want to give it a try, go to aura.com/Dan Monroe to start a free 2-week trial. Link in the description. And now, back to Darkman. Joel and Ethan Coen, known in Hollywood as the Coen brothers, helped Raimi with the initial structure of the script. Sam Raimi's own brother, Ivan, who was actually a doctor, also added some pretty vital elements to the story, which was now in like its 4th draft. The movie studio, Universal, in all of its infinite wisdom, brought in their own screenwriting team, Daniel and Joshua Golden, to work on the script's 5th draft. The Raimi brothers then followed up with even more additional drafts, with finally the 12th draft, yes, the 12th being accepted by the studio as the final shooting script.
That's really what I wanted, was to create a man, a monster, who had a human soul, who was still a man. Kind of what they used to do in the classic old horror pictures, like Frankenstein or Phantom of the Opera. So if they can identify with the character and be with him for his suffering, for his anger, and understand him, yet are somewhat horrified by him, I would be satisfied, because I think then they'll be along for the whole ride of the picture.
The cast of this film was nothing less than spectacular, with a very young Liam Neeson in the starring role as Darkman, Frances McDormand as his love interest Julie, Scottish-born Australian actor Colin Friels as Louis Strack Jr., and the incredibly talented Larry Drake as Robert Durant, certainly a bit of a turnaround from the character he had just played previously, Benny, on Law and Order, for which he won not 1, but 2 Primetime Emmy Awards. Interesting. Sam Raimi originally wanted his good friend Bruce Campbell from the Evil Dead series to play Darkman, but the studio executives didn't consider Bruce a well enough known actor to actually carry the film. Yeah, okay, whatever. So other actors had to be considered, including Bill Paxton and even Gary Oldman, before finally landing on Liam Neeson, mostly because Sam Raimi liked Neeson's, and I quote, old Gary Cooper-style charisma. Now, I'm not sure whether this is kind of cool or kind of underhanded, but Bill Paxton was the number one choice at the time to play the lead in this film until he told his friend, Liam Neeson, about the audition, who kind of like swept in under the radar, auditioned, and got the part. Paxton was so pissed off, he didn't even speak to Neeson for months, but that's Hollywood. Neeson was thrilled to get the part. He found the inner turmoil of the character not only fascinating, but a challenge to portray on screen, and even contacted the Phoenix Society for Burn Survivors to study the emotional and social healing process of those victims. Pretty cool.
It's always been a childhood fantasy, to be really honest, since I was like 10 or 11. Charles Laughton and the Hunchback of Notre Dame. That film just left such a score on me. And when I read Sam's script, it seemed to embody that and all those other tragic, doomed characters who have to go through life altered in some way and who kind of misfits of society. I know they were called monsters, but I never saw them as that. They were just tortured souls, you know. So I leapt at the chance to fulfill a lot of those childhood fantasies of playing these really dignified, sympathetic people who've been maimed by life in some way, you know?
Originally, Universal was pushing to cast Julia Roberts in the role as Julie, and this is really interesting, Julia Roberts and Liam Neeson had briefly dated a short time prior, so Roberts' agent requested politely that she be withdrawn from consideration. Demi Moore and Bridget Fonda were considered for the role, and some people claim that even Geena Davis and Melanie Griffith auditioned for the part, but eventually the very talented Academy Award-nominated actress Frances McDormand got an audition and landed the part, which is actually pretty easy to believe considering that she was married to one of the Coen brothers, Joel, and all of them together lived with Sam Raimi at the time. Certainly not a bad way to get a Hollywood audition, I can tell you that. Couple of cool cameos in the hospital scene at the beginning of the film. We had a brief glance at legendary director John Landis and everyone's favorite sexy 70s nurse, of course, Jenny Agutter. Filming for Darkman began in April 1989, shot on location in Los Angeles, Toronto, Ontario, and Santa Clarita Studios in California. The final budget for the film, issued by Universal, came in at just over $14 million, which gave the production team the ability to design and create not only the incredible laboratory set for Darkman, but tons and tons of outstanding miniature sets that were so incredibly lifelike that even I didn't think they were miniatures at the time, and with the increased budget, they could now afford helicopters and professional stuntmen to film the super cool climactic helicopter chase through the city at the end of the film. Universal Pictures was, to say the least, understandably more than a little concerned that Darkman was going to look and feel a little bit too much like the Evil Dead movies, to which director Sam Raimi also agreed. So, director of photography Bill Pope was brought in, along with production designer Randy Sir, with the intent to give the film a bit of a 1930s Universal horror film look, specifically in the case of Darkman's lab, which they hoped would be even slightly reminiscent to some extent of the original Frankenstein. The miniature effects in this film were just unbelievable, huge miniatures that were so convincing you just couldn't tell them from their life-size counterparts. Absolutely brilliant work that, in the end, gave this film a wonderful sense of scale and believability. The leg gun was so awesome, really super cool story element, which was, in actuality, a modified micro Uzi submachine gun. Now, even though Liam Neeson was quite excited with the challenge of working with a character beneath a mask, so to speak, he found the shooting schedule nothing less than completely exhausting, with up to 5 hours a day in the makeup chair with the 10-piece prosthetic makeups, then wearing that makeup for up to 18 hours a day during filming. It would certainly not be a stretch to conclude that Frances McDormand didn't really have the easiest time on this production, primarily because most of her previous work had been done on stage in a theater, and was finding the transition to making actual Hollywood movies a bit daunting, to say the least. It's also no secret that she wasn't completely thrilled with her character as written, often referring to her Julie character as a bit of a bimbo. Principal photography for Darkman concluded in August of 1989, now opening up a whole new set of conflicts in post-production. This is bizarre, but editor David Stiven was so overwhelmed with cutting this film together that he eventually suffered a complete nervous breakdown and left the production completely. Early preview screenings of Darkman really didn't go over very well, like at all. People were laughing in all the wrong places, and there was a whole ton of griping about the fact that this film just didn't have a happy ending. The studio executives at Universal went so far as to describe this film themselves as not only one of the worst scoring films in the studio's history, but also the worst film they had ever seen. God, studio executives. So, in their infinite wisdom, Universal brought in their own editor named Bud S. Smith, who worked on recutting the film for about 3 weeks with absolutely no input at all from either Sam Raimi, the director, or Robert Tapert, the producer. Smith cut the film down from over 2 hours to just under 85 minutes, trying to improve the overall flow of the film, and even though preview scores continued to drop with this edit of the film, Universal said, "All right, that's it, that's enough, that's the final cut." Or was it? Gotta give these guys credit. Without the Universal Studio executives knowing anything about it, producer Robert Tapert, along with a new editor, went back in and recut the film again, putting back around 9 minutes of previously cut footage without the approval of either Sam Raimi or Universal. And this cut is what was actually sent out to theaters in 1990. How freaking cool is that? Kinda interesting. Bruce Campbell not only got a cameo appearance at the very end of the film as the newly refaced Peyton Westlake, but he also worked in post-production, redubbing many of Liam Neeson's lines for the television release, where the dialogue needed to be toned down just a bit for network television. The soundtrack for this film by composer Danny Elfman was absolutely outstanding, very reminiscent of Danny Elfman's, shall we say, signature sound, who previously just scored the music to Tim Burton's Batman 1 year earlier. In fact, I'm pretty sure if you took this score and dropped it into any of Tim Burton's Batman movies, you'd be pretty hard-pressed to tell the difference. In 2020, La La Land Records released an expanded soundtrack from this film featuring over 30 minutes of previously unreleased music. One major aspect of releasing any film, either big budget or independent, is marketing. And man, did this movie have incredible marketing. So good, in fact, that Sam Raimi has been quoted as saying that he believed that the brilliant marketing alone is what eventually pushed this film into the money-making category, bringing in over $8 million in its opening weekend and eventually almost $50 million worldwide. Not too shabby for a film that Universal claimed was the worst thing they'd ever seen. In short, audiences loved this film, and believe it or not, for once, so did a majority of the critics. The LA Times, The New Yorker, Rolling Stone, USA Today, and yes, even Roger Ebert praised the film for not only its bizarre sense of humor and over-the-top special effects, but a new and refreshing take on the superhero genre overall. Darkman was released on Laserdisc, VHS, and Betamax in 1991, DVD in 98, HD DVD in 2007, Blu-ray in 2010, and finally, a gorgeous 4K Blu-ray transfer by Shout Factory in February of 2024. Okay, but what about all those super cool costumes and props from the film? Well, believe it or not, there really is quite a bit. In 2003, Durant's box of severed fingers actually sold at a heritage auction for about $750. In 2006, one of Liam Neeson's bandage hoods worn in the film auctioned off for about $350. In 2014, a life-size figure of Darkman was auctioned by Heritage Auctions, including Liam Neeson's original screen-used trench coat. In 2018, a prosthetic mask and hand set worn by Liam Neeson sold for over $2,500. And in March 2024, another set of Liam Neeson's hands and mask appliance, which were in unbelievable condition, sold at a heritage auction for over $3,200. But believe me, the fanaticism and devotion to this film certainly didn't end there. Shortly after the film's release, Alterian Incorporated produced two different gorgeous Halloween masks of the Darkman character. There was also a really cool Darkman action figure made by Soda Toys. In 2008, Sideshow Collectibles released a gorgeous 1/4 scale premium format figure of Darkman, which goes for really big bucks if you can even find one today. We had video games. In 1990, Marvel Comics published a 3-issue set based on the film with 6 additional comics published in 1993. This is really quite strange, and I never knew this, but apparently there was a 30-minute television pilot created based on Darkman by Universal Television in 1992, featuring an altered retelling of the original story, with Larry Drake once again reprising his role as Robert Durant. Unfortunately, the pilot never got picked up and obviously never aired, but it is available to watch, right here in this place. So do a quick search, dive in, and have fun. As far as the sequels, remakes, and reimaginings, well, we did have 2 sequels, sort of. We had Darkman 2, The Return of Durant in 1995, and Darkman 3, Die, Darkman, Die in 1996, both direct-to-video sequels that had Sam Raimi in the role of executive producer rather than director. Personally, I've never seen either of these 2 sequels, but if you have, and if you think they're worth checking out, let me know. This is really super interesting. Back in 2022, Liam Neeson said that he would definitely be interested in reading the script for another official Darkman sequel, and Sam Raimi himself confirmed that Universal Studios was considering a Darkman sequel, and they even have a producer attached, but that's really all we know at this point. So keep your severed, fingers crossed. Come on, wouldn't that be awesome? Sam Raimi and Liam Neeson reunited again for another Darkman film. Take my money. Darkman not only overcame the extreme Hollywood hurdles of a troubled production to become one of the most beloved anti-heroes in the genre, but more importantly, helped pave the way for other classic, unforgettable 1990s horror flicks like Body Parts, The Exorcist 3, Interview with the Vampire, Bram Stoker's Dracula, Misery, Army of Darkness, Jacob's Ladder, Seven, Silence of the Lambs, and so many more. We could be here all day, but that, my friends, is the topic of another video. I really hope you guys enjoyed that deep dive into Darkman, and if you did, and you like this kind of stuff, please consider subscribing to the channel. I've got a whole bunch of new videos coming up really soon that I know you guys are just gonna dig. And please feel free to stop back anytime as we together continue the conversation on movies, music, and monsters.
Movies, music, and monsters.